Emilia Carr tortured and suffocated a young mother in a storage trailer over a twisted love triangle. Paula Cooper was 15 when she stabbed a kind-hearted Bible teacher 33 times during a robbery gone wrong. And Angela Simpson subjected a disabled man to 3 days of unimaginable torture before dismembering his body and bragging about it.
Is it hard to up a human body?
Nah, not really. You'd be amazed. It's quite simple, actually. You should try it. It's only a felony 6.
Each killer emerged from a childhood scarred by abuse and trauma. But here's the question that haunts us. When broken homes create monsters, who really pays the price? 3 innocent victims would tell us if they could. Paula Cooper. Imagine dedicating your entire life to helping others, teaching Bible studies to neighborhood kids, making them lunches, giving them rides to church, only to have that same kindness become the reason for your death. This is the heartbreaking story of Ruth Pelkey, a 78-year-old woman whose compassion made her a target for one of the most shocking murders in Gary, Indiana's history. Ruth Pelkey lived alone, but many knew her and spoke of her in the highest terms. After growing up on a farm in Peru, Indiana, she had spent decades in Gary with her husband, Oscar, transforming their home into a beacon of hope through Bible studies and prayer meetings. Even after Oscar's passing, Ruth refused to leave the house where they'd built their life together. She kept gardening, drove her 1977 Plymouth to the grocery store, and continued being the neighborhood's grandma figure. Enter Paula Cooper, a 15-year-old with a childhood straight out of a nightmare. Born to a mentally unstable mother and an abusive father, Paula's early years were nothing short of a horror movie. Her father would make her strip naked before whipping her with belts and electrical cords. Her mother once tried to unalive herself and her daughters by leaving them in a running car in a closed garage. After this, it was a long series of foster homes for Paula. This was the backdrop that shaped the teenager who would become Indiana's youngest death row inmate. On May 14th, 1985, Paula and 3 other teenage girls, April Beverly, Karen Corder, and Denise Thomas, were running low on cash after blowing through money from a previous break-in. That's when April remembered the kind old lady who taught Bible studies, the same woman who had taught her for years, made her lunches, and comforted her after her mother's death. The irony is gut-wrenching. The girls' plan was simple: ask about Bible classes to get inside, then rob her. April, feeling a shred of conscience, stayed behind, knowing Ruth would recognize her. But Paula? She wrapped a 12-inch butcher knife in her jacket and led the charge. What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. When Ruth let the girls in and sat down to write Bible class information for them, Paula attacked. She knocked the elderly woman to the floor, demanding money while slashing at her arms and legs. But the true horror was yet to come. As Ruth lay there, bleeding and terrified, she looked up at her teenage attacker and said, "If you do this, you'll be sorry." Those were her last words. Paula responded by stabbing her 33 times. Just think about that for a moment. 33 times. While Ruth, who had spent her life helping others, lay dying on her dining room floor, the girls covered her face with a towel and ransacked her house. Their take, $10 and the keys to Ruth's Plymouth. The next day, Bob Pelk went to check on his stepmother after she didn't answer his phone calls. When he got no response at the door, he used the hidden spare key to enter. What he found was every child's nightmare. The house ransacked, papers everywhere, couch cushions scattered. Then, in the dining room, he saw Ruth lying on the floor with that white towel over her face. When he reached down to touch her, she was already cold. The phone line had been cut, forcing him to run to the neighbors for help. He waited outside his childhood home, knowing his stepmom was lying dead inside. The investigation moved quickly. Paula's birth control prescription was found in a jacket left at the scene, and the stolen car was spotted being driven by teenagers. When questioned, Paula asked that no one look at her while she confessed, a chilling detail that speaks volumes about her state of mind.
Paula Cooper was convicted of the murder of the 1985 death of 78-year-old Bible school teacher Ruth Pelkey inside her Gary home. Cooper was sentenced to death at 16 years old.
The case became an international controversy overnight. Paula became the youngest person ever sentenced to death in Indiana, triggering debates about juvenile capital punishment. Even Pope John Paul II got involved, pleading for her life. But perhaps the most surprising twist came from Ruth's own grandson, Bill Pelkey, who fought to save Paula's life, believing his grandmother would have wanted forgiveness. Eventually, her death sentence was commuted to 60 years. Paula Cooper was released in 2013, seemingly rehabilitated with a GED and college degree. She became a manager at Five Guys and later a legal assistant. But demons don't die easily. In 2015, less than 2 years after her release, Paula drove to a parking lot, recorded a final message to her family, and took her own life.
Who was once the youngest death row inmate in Indiana, committed suicide today in Indianapolis.
Of the other girls involved, their fates read like a Greek tragedy. April was unalived by an abusive boyfriend after her release. Karen died in prison from heart problems. Denise, the least involved, was released after 18 years and disappeared into obscurity. Ruth Pelkey's murder forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about justice, redemption, and the cycle of violence. Was Paula Cooper a monster born, or was she created by a system that failed her at every turn? The truth lies somewhere in the middle, a place where understanding doesn't equal forgiveness, and where justice doesn't always bring peace. But one thing remains crystal clear. Ruth Pelkey's kindness deserved better than to become her death sentence. Her legacy lives on through her grandson's anti-death penalty work, proving that even in the darkest stories, light can emerge if we're brave enough to look for it. Emilia Carr. Imagine killing a young mother of two, then taking the moral high horse with the detectives.
You don't think you deserve that?
No, because I didn't kill her.
Okay, for you to try to come up with something.
I'm not coming up with anything because I've got people who will talk to you for me, to tell you. But what I'm saying is, he's bragging.
Not just that, but 16 years later, Emilia Carr is still sitting on death row feigning innocence. In February 2009, in Citron, Florida, 26-year-old Heather Strong disappeared. A few days later, her mom phoned authorities.
We're currently looking into the disappearance of your daughter.
Yes.
Okay, have you heard from her?
No, I haven't.
When was the last time you heard from her?
Somewhere about the 10th, 11th, or 12th of February.
Is this unusual for...
Yes, it is.
Long?
And Heather's birthday is Monday. And if she doesn't call me Monday, I know something's wrong.
Right, yes, ma'am.
Heather was a single mom of two, working hard to make ends meet. She always had the support of her mom, and they would chat with each other at least once a week, so she was right to worry when Heather stopped contacting her. Heather's work colleagues at the Iron Skillet restaurant rang up the emergency services in Marion County around the same time.
She was a good employee. That's why when she didn't come to work, we all knew something was wrong, because she always showed up for work. She was a single mother raising two kids.
A month later, the police were still looking for her, but they had their eyes on her estranged husband, Josh Fulgham. Just a month before she disappeared, Josh had held a shotgun to her head. Classic loser move, right? But here's the really chilling part. Heather knew what was coming. In her last phone call with Josh while he was in jail, she literally told him, "You're gonna kill me when you get out." Despite her fears, despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Heather signed his release papers anyway. 8 days later, she disappeared off the face of the earth. The last anyone saw her, she'd gotten an upsetting phone call at work. She told her colleagues she needed to get away from Josh and keep her kids safe from him.
After the phone call, she indicated to other people that she just needed to get away from him and keep the kids away from him.
When detectives started digging, Josh's story fell apart faster than a house of cards. He claimed he'd picked Heather up from work the day she vanished, complete with detailed descriptions of what she was wearing and the bags she was carrying. One problem, the security cameras at Petro told a different story. Heather hadn't been there at all that day.
You know there's video at Petro, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, they got cameras all around it.
No video.
Of what?
Of Heather. At that Petro. On that date. All day. All night.
Then there was the suspicious activity on Heather's credit card, used by none other than Josh himself. His excuse? She'd left it with him before supposedly running off to Mississippi. But why would a mother planning to escape leave her credit card with the very person she was trying to get away from? Now meet Emilia Carr, and trust me, this is where things get even darker. 8 months pregnant with Josh's baby, Emilia was the definition of obsessed. While Heather was working double shifts to support her kids, Emilia and Josh were weaving a web of betrayal that would end in murder. The backstory? Josh had been engaged to Emilia, but married Heather instead. Talk about a recipe for disaster. It turns out Emilia had actually tried to hire someone to kill Heather before, offering $500 for the job. When no one took her up on her murder-for-hire scheme, she decided to handle it herself. The whole situation was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Heather was desperately trying to escape an abusive relationship. Josh was furious about potentially losing access to his kids, and Emilia was pregnant with Josh's baby and determined to eliminate her competition once and for all. Their solution was as brutal as it was calculated. They lured Heather to a storage trailer, tied her to a chair, and committed an act so cruel it's hard to even write about. They tried to break her neck, and when that failed, they put a plastic bag over her head and watched her suffocate, knowing she had 2 kids to pick up from school that day. When investigators finally caught up with them, both Josh and Emilia turned on each other like rabid dogs.
You don't care about her, do you?
I do, but not like I do Heather.
But the evidence was damning for both. Heather's body was found in a shallow grave next to a trailer on Emilia's family property. And if that wasn't enough, Emilia was caught on tape describing the murder.
You put the bag over her head. We tried to snap her neck. That didn't work. You did.
The trials that followed brought some measure of justice. Emilia Carr became Florida's youngest woman on death row at age 25. Josh got life without parole. But here's what makes this story even more infuriating. To this day, Emilia maintains maintains her innocence.
I am sitting on death row for nothing more than a series of lies.
Meanwhile, Josh eventually confessed from prison, admitting he was there when Emilia killed Heather, describing the horrific, gurgling noise Heather made as she died.
I done it, Mama. I didn't do it by myself. But I done it.
The most tragic part, Heather saw it coming. She knew she was in danger, but like so many victims of DV, she got caught in a web she couldn't escape. Angela Simpson. You guys, we've saved the worst for last because what Angela Simpson did and said had detectives and journalists crying.
Is it hard to up a human body?
Nah, not really. You'd be amazed. It's quite simple, actually. You should try it. It's only a felony 6.
On a scorching Phoenix morning in August 2009, churchgoers arrived to find something that would haunt them forever, a burning trash bin containing the remains of what was once a human being. But this wasn't just a murder. This was 3 days of pure, calculated torture by a person who still shows zero remorse about it.
It's pretty rewarding work. It's great for the soul.
Terry Neely was everything good about humanity. At 46, despite being partially paralyzed and confined to a motorized wheelchair, he never lost his smile. Living in an assisted care facility, he showed endless gratitude to his caregivers and brought joy to everyone around him. This was a man who, despite his disabilities, chose to see the beauty in life. He never complained about needing help with basic tasks like showering. Instead, he thanked his nurses daily and made friends wherever he went. Terry Neely was the last person on earth who deserved what was about to happen to him. When Terry went missing on August 2nd, no one imagined the horror he was enduring. Angela Simpson, a 33-year-old woman with dead eyes and an even deader soul, had lured him to her apartment with promises of drugs and intimacy. The moment he crossed her threshold, Terry entered hell on earth. For 3 days, Simpson subjected Terry to torture so brutal that seasoned medical examiners had to take breaks during the autopsy. She tied him to a chair and positioned a mirror in front of him so he could watch his own torture. She pulled out his teeth one by one. She drove a 3-inch nail into his head. When he would pass out from the pain, she used a blowtorch to wake him up. Think about that for a moment. 3 days, 72 hours of unimaginable agony, all while looking at his own reflection, knowing there was no escape. Terry survived 50 stab wounds, nails in his head, hammer hits, and burns, only to have his cut when Angela Simpson was bored with him. Only one fingerprint was not burnt enough for the police to identify his remains. The case cracked when Angela Simpson was arrested alongside her pimp for an unrelated armed robbery, and during questioning, she proudly confessed to Terry's murder, providing details only the killer could know. Investigators also discovered she lived just blocks from the church where Terry's remains were found, and multiple witnesses placed Terry at her apartment complex on the night he disappeared. The most sickening part? Simpson was proud of what she'd done. In countless police then prison interviews, she spoke about Terry's torture with excitement in her voice. Her excuse? She claimed he was a snitch, a complete lie, as Terry had never worked with law enforcement in his life. She had simply picked him because he was vulnerable.
Anything I can do to help put a snitch down is my pleasure.
So it was your pleasure when you committed this murder?
See, that's kind of up. I'm thinking, I don't know what my lawyer would say if I answered that straight out. Hold on, yes. Yes, it was. It's pretty rewarding work. It's great for the soul.
Psychiatric experts would later suggest that Angela's bravado was a mask, a persona she created to feel powerful after a lifetime of abuse in the foster system. But does understanding her background excuse what she did? The woman placed a mirror in front of Terry so he could watch himself suffer. That's not trauma acting out. That's pure evil. Prison staff said Angela was the only inmate who truly terrified them. One guard said, "She's probably the only one I take every precaution in the world with." Her interviewer also says her words haunt him regularly.
It was really extraordinarily disturbing. I still think about it.
Angela Simpson got life without parole, and she treated it like a victory lap. She complained she should have gotten the death penalty, bragged about having family in prison, and said she'd kill again if given the chance. When she was asked in another interview why she unalived Terry, this time, she didn't say anything about him being a snitch. Instead, she bounced back the question to the journalist.
Why did you guys want to kill me? Phoenix wanted to kill me. What's the difference? Everybody has a reason to kill.
Her final words in her interview? "That's gonna be wicked. Make it look good, please." She was playing to the cameras until the very end. Meanwhile, Terry Neely's loved ones will never find peace. How can you move on when you know someone you cared about suffered such an unimaginable death? The staff at his care facility still blame themselves for not reporting him missing sooner, though they know it probably wouldn't have made a difference. This story is a reminder that real evil exists in this world. Angela Simpson tortured a disabled man for 3 days, murdered him, dismembered his body, and set his remains on on fire in front of a church. Then she smiled about it. She laughed about it. She wanted to do it again. Terry Neely's only crime was being kind enough to trust the wrong person. He spent his life spreading joy despite his own challenges, only to die in the most horrific way imaginable. These stories, Emilia Carr, Paula Cooper, and Angela Simpson, force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Monsters aren't born, they're often created. Each of these killers emerged from childhoods marked by neglect, and trauma. But does understanding their origins lessen their responsibility? And what about the innocent people who paid the ultimate price for someone else's damaged soul? Perhaps the most haunting question isn't why these killers did what they did, but why society's broken systems keep creating them, and why the kindest among us end up paying for those failures with their lives. Thanks for watching, you guys. Leave a comment and let me know what we can do to prevent any more monsters like these from being made. Before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon. Stay safe.